Hey everyone, it's Matt C, and I've been thinking a lot about Braveheart. Remember Braveheart? Uh, so often I don't know I think about the comic book industry, and I think about the perpetual controversies that seem to whoa, chill out. Nissan Z, what were those things called? You know, the weird ones. They kind of look like the Supras, but kind of trashier. One of those just drove by me. Uh, yeah. So anyway, I wonder if I'm gonna cut this out. So I've been thinking a lot about Braveheart as kind of a metaphor for where I kind of stand within comics drama. Hashtag comics drama. Um, you remember that crazy Irishman, the schizophrenic dude who he was, I guess he's kind of a Confederate of sorts. He had common cause with the with William Wallace and Hamish and all those guys, but he wasn't a Scotsman. He didn't have Scotsman's grievances against England. He had Irishman's grievances. They're different things, but he found out William Wallace would be killing some Englishmen, and so he joined in. He ended up being a pretty cool dude. Um, I think he was kind of a libertarian, in fact. I don't know. Though he did kind of claim all Ireland for himself. I don't know. Um, I don't know what that kind of makes him. ANCAP or communist. Tell me in the comments. But yeah, so it's like latest round of comics drama within Comicsgate, uh, and at the not to be outdone, the traditional big two kind of anti-Comicsgate market is going through its own civil war too, tearing apart man eaters, and it's really kind of interesting. I just been thinking about how I think it was summer of 2017, I think, when Zach Diversity in Comics at the time got um, kind of deplatformed off of Antarctic, and EVS around that same time, Ethan Van Sciver left DC. I think that was that was the end of Comicsgate 1.0. I mean, that's the original charter of Comicsgate, is how can we kind of put the big two back on track? How can we kind of start a reformation of sorts? I promise I'm gonna try and keep the metaphors to a minimum this time. Stay on target, Matt. And they tried to have a reformation and it failed. I don't think there's no one who supports Comicsgate principles who who speaks up at all within the mainstream comic book industry. Every like about it wouldn't even matter if 98% of them agreed. There's 2% who are going to chop their heads off if they stick it out. So Comicsgate's over. As far as that original charter is concerned, there's a Comicsgate 2.0, and that's now that we're refugees, now that we're kind of immigrants kicked out of the castle, we're living in the woods now, running around as rebels. I'm gonna try and slowly steer it back to Braveheart. All right, let's see how well I can do with this. Give me a thumbs up if I do it decently. So that's my motivation. So the Comicsgate 2.0 is kind of like how do we make comics that we want to read in the indie comic scene, which is really, honestly, there's nothing to distinguish Comicsgate 2.0 from indie comics. And by indie comics, I don't mean Vertigo, Image. I mean, that's what comic skaters define it. That's what the mainstream comics readers define as indie comics. I'm talking about independently published comics, which is what indie used to mean. I remember in like the early 2000s, I used to, everyone was like in the indie bands, like indie was a thing before hipster, before all that stuff. It was indie. And there was always this big distinction people would make. This was high school for me, so remember this being super serious. You had to make sure that you were, if you called someone indie, they had to be self produced to some extent, or at least self kind of promotioned and marketed, and they had to be running their own ship. They couldn't just be a small, you know, working for a smaller man. If they were working for the man, they weren't indie. That's how indie. I think that's how indie comic book creators have always defined it. And screw Vertigo and Image. The one of those is already going down. So, I mean, TikTok comic book industry. So anyway, getting back on track. Yeah, that crazy Irishman. So, so this whole like Comicsgate 2.0 is really, let's make comics and let's produce them ourselves, and let's sell them to ourselves, and that's because that's indistinguishable from the general indie comic scene. There's nothing constitutionally different. There's no reason to integrate into the larger indie comic scene. It's like getting kicked out of your home country, immigrating to another country, bringing all your guns with you, so you can kind of saber rattle on YouTube continuously, and kind of, you know, think about the old world, the homeland where you came from. And you know, you keep that militancy up long enough, eventually that level of anxiety and anger and frustration, which can't be satisfied because you're pointing it towards a lost cause. You're pointing it towards a country that already kicked you out, that's already obviously DC and Vertigo and you know, and Marvel and all this stuff. They've long since left comic books proper, as in you know, selling to being beholden to the comic books reader. That kind of platform has been left behind years ago. They've switched to more profitable, more lucrative, and more stable industries like TV and movies, selling IPs for kind of multimedia kind of franchises. It makes sense, and they got woke in order to do that, because comic books are a popular medium now, and so they're gonna they're not for nerds anymore. Or even nerds aren't for nerds anymore. Have you noticed that? So that whole industry's moved on. You're not going to be able to change it. And so if you're frustrated, it's been a couple years, and if you're still angry and frustrated that industry isn't changing, and you're still Comicsgate, I mean, eventually you're just going to turn that anger in on yourselves or to your teammates. And that's, I mean, they're constantly imploding. Anti-Comicsgate is constantly imploding. So is Comicsgate. I suggest, I don't want to say disarming. Not anti self-defense in this circumstance, but use your weapons for more profitable means, I guess. Use them for hunting, and like that the crazy Irishman, use them for taking out assassins, I guess, within your movement, if that's what you got to do. But don't if you're constantly in a militant mindset, eventually, you know, that's just a powder keg that eventually gets set off, and people are going to continually fracture and break away, and that's how they're going to. So just to wrap it up, integration is inevitable. You're living amongst the indie scene. Your constitution, the belief by which you're standing is actually indistinguishable from every other indie comics creator, properly understood, as at least as I understand it. So you're gonna integrate one way or another. You're either gonna integrate by blowing each other up until there's no more Comicsgate, and so you do so violently and harshly, and then you all hate each other, and then you go build your fiefdoms by yourself, and you end up looking more like the rest of the indie publishing community that way. Or you can just start marrying in, uh, learning the language, being cool with your neighbors, not having you know um, code words at the door to make sure that I only buy Comicsgate. I mean, that's cool if you want to do that, but you're going to find less and less Comicsgate creators to buy, because there's going to be more people leaving than there are going to be coming to the scene. The thing, I mean, I don't know. Maybe, like, for instance, I'm in the Facebook group, the Comicsgate Facebook group. I have been for about, I don't know, most of a year now, I guess. I think it's kind of interesting that most everyone there is tired of EVS and Zach now, and War Campaign, and everyone who's touted on Twitter as the leaders of Comicsgate. There's about 1,000 people in there, and maybe they're the ones who have been left behind. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they just don't matter anymore among Comicsgate ranks. But things used to be a lot more united. But your cause isn't clear anymore, or you haven't fully focused on this new frontier that you find yourselves in called the indie scene. If you're really tired, if you're not reading Marvel and DC anymore, then maybe it's time to stop talking about Marvel and DC. I don't know. I don't think about Marvel and DC, and I don't read them. I read like Star Wars every once in a while. They've got some cool anthologies that come out on occasion. There's some neat stuff from Image. What's that? The Lady Mechanisma or something. I pick that up every once in a while. That's pretty cool. It seems like she's always got like a free comic book day thing happening. I don't know why I'm talking about it like it's her. It's a guy that makes it. But yeah, don't spend mental energy. Don't spend your militant mental energy hating on a worldview that you can't change. So that you see represented in a different demographic than you. I suggest spending that energy on solving the how can I make indie comics the best it can be worldview. Yeah. So all that to say, I was just kind of okay. Here's my attempt. Let's see if I can get that thumbs up. The Crazy Irishman. So he kind of joins, Hamish and William Wallace and all them, and they think he's a weirdo, and he's like, I don't know if you really should be a part of what we're doing because you're not Scottish and you're kind of insane, and you may be either libertarian or communist, but and schizophrenic. But turns out he was one of the nicest and most loyal guys in their group, but instead of turning this whole rebellion back against the Englishmen and killing off the English, and if I remember right, that the the movie didn't go well, at least for William Wallace by the end. Rather than focusing your energy back towards some sort of pitched battle that everyone seems to be praying for between left and right, between the two sides of the culture war, hashtag culture war, why not focus that energy? How about listen to that Crazy Irishman and let's go fight for indie comics, and let's make that a the federal vision of plurality and genuine diversity, genuine storytelling, vibrancy that it deserves, that it always has been, but it hasn't had the flush of interest like it has now. 2019 is a pretty exciting time. I mean, since 2018, I guess. It's been pretty freaking fantastic to be an indie comics creator. There's a lot of interest, more than there has been in the past. We've kind of pushed over into it. I mean, it really took you guys coming out to my forest to get things going, which is exciting. You guys did not think that self-publishing was legit until you realized that it's the only thing you could do in order to get the sort of stories you want, which is great. That's why I joined indie comics as soon as I picked up indie comics. I've been out. I was born out here, and I'm glad you're here. Stop pointing guns at each other and start hunting deer or whatever William Wallace was doing when he was when that cool Irishman kind of saved his life. Remember that? Man, I kind of need to see this movie again. I've just been like memeing it in my head all day. So anyway, that's my advice to Comicsgate. That's kind of my thoughts on. And I know I'm speaking to people who are sick. I know the majority of people who were calling themselves Comicsgaters in 2017 and 2018 are either not calling themselves that now, or are just kind of mumbling their support. They're at least tired of the division and the backbiting, and everyone's claiming each other's SJW, and a lot of that has to do with not accepting what Comicsgate 2.0 is, which is 100% indistinguishable from just making indie comics. So embrace the new nation in which you find yourselves, integrate into our wonderful diverse culture called Indie Comics Nation. Marry into the community, learn the language, have a good time. It's here for you, and it's here. It's my land and it's your land. But yeah, I don't think you're going home. This is your home now. So start treating it like a home, and stop kicking around the furniture and pissing on the sofa. It's really annoying. it's not the sort of home in any indie comics creator wants to live in. That'd be swell. So yep, that's my video. I think, I don't know, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this. I feel like I'm gonna sound just as schizophrenic as that Irishman. But anyway, I'm gonna be on Sweetcast tonight at 10 p.m. EST. That's 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for you Utahans. What do people in Utah call themselves? Anyway, and so yeah, I'm gonna be having a good time. We're gonna be talking about how to whether or not to unionize the comic book industry. That'll be fun. And talk about adventure comics and stuff of that sort. That's at least what I'm anticipating. So we're gonna have a blast, and yeah, long live indie comics. See ya. Bye.